everybody to today's live talk. My name is Thomas Weißenfels and I'm the moderator of today's session, and I'm happy to introduce to you somebody who's really important today, my colleague, Inken Schubert. Inken, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you. Thank you, Thomas. Welcome from my side to everybody. My name is Inken Schubert, and I'm here with you today because I'm taking care of the chat or of the Q&A box. You will be able to put in your questions. You find this box on your screen, and you can, even if you want, you can enlarge the box or put it on another place. And you can put your questions in, and I will try to include them into the conversation. So from time to time, I will speak up and bring your questions into the conversation so that you can stay absolutely anonymous. Only me, I will see the questions and nobody else. So you can stay anonymous and nobody else will see your question, but still they will be answered if there aren't too many questions.
Okay. Well, we will see. And yeah, as I want to start before I will introduce our today's expert. At first, maybe the information that today's live talk, for those of you who haven't participated yet to a live talk of us, it's not like a scientific lecture, like 100% structured. It's an interview. I prepared some questions, and as Inken described, you can ask your questions and we will bring them into the live talk, so we don't just get answers to my questions, but also to yours, and I hope you will participate. And that said, I'm happy to introduce Dorothea Kenny, our today's experts. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Thomas. I'm really happy to be here. My name is Dorothea Kenny, as you already stated, and I'm a health manager and mental health coach, and I've been working in corporate health management for the last 15 years. So I've been spending the last 15 years helping and supporting people to keep their balance or learn how to regain their balance in challenging times. And this is something that we're going to talk about today. And I'm really happy that you're here today to take out some time to boost your let's call it your mental immune system. We will be talking about that later on.
Yeah, and that's what we are going to talk about today. It's mental health is something, and mental balance that sounds a little cryptic at first, but as I imagine, we are all familiar with all the many different issues that cause us worry and anxiety and affect our mental health in everyday's life. And when we spoke briefly before the event, you used a term that I find very interesting. You talked about our mental immune system. And now I would ask you, would you please start by explaining what this term is all about?
Yeah, I have to say it's not a term that I came up with. It's by a German scientist and psychiatrist called Professor Dr. Busch. He wrote a book on this and he phrased the term mental immune system. But I really like this metaphor to better bring across why it is important to train our mental immune system and how we can do that. And that's something that we're going to talk about today. But let me first explain what do I mean when I talk about a mental immune system. Basically, it's like a regular or physical immune system. So why do we have this immune system? So when we're confronted with bacteria and viruses, that our body's able to fight them off, right? And when we're born as children or as babies and young children, you know, whoever has children knows that they're sick a lot in the early years because their immune system needs to be built up first. The immune system needs to be confronted with a cold and other viruses in order to be strengthened. And our mental health protection works in a similar way, in terms of we're not confronted with bacteria or viruses, but nowadays, as you stated in your introduction, Thomas, we're confronted with, especially the last few years, with enormous amounts of negative news, bad news, also possibly fake news. The last few years have been it feels like they've been dominated by a lot of insecurity, a lot of instability when we look at world politics, when we look at local politics. So a lot of people are being confronted with mental and emotional stressors, mental and emotional strain, more so than maybe in the years before that. At least it feels that way to a lot of us. And because of all this extensive confrontation with whether it's current world affairs or whether it's a private situation, whether it's a change process in your company, usually we find that it's not just one area that is affected, but overall people feel a lot more challenged by all the events of today's world. So that's why it's important to be aware of what we can do in order to protect our mental health, our mental well-being, to protect our soul from all the negativity and the negative influences which a lot of us feel increasingly surrounded by. And so today we're going to take a look at some ideas of what can I do in order to protect my mental immune system, and what can I do to even strengthen my mental immune system. This is what today's going to be about, so that you're enabled to better deal with what is going on around us. So many things around us we can't influence. They're happening at a level that is beyond our control, yet we're affected by it. And it's about finding maybe a better, a more constructive, a more healthy way to deal with all the stuff that's going on the outside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when I think about all this situations, stories, things that we experience in everyday life, it's very individual how they affect us. So maybe you have a personal example where you yourself have successfully used your mental resilience before that you could tell us about.
Yeah, I sure can. It's a few years back now. In fact, it was around 10 years ago at this stage. I was in a phase in my life where literally like everything was turned upside down, a situation I'd never been in before. So everything that kind of had stabilized me and that I knew well kind of seemed to be falling apart at the same time. It was like a separation divorce thing after 20 years. Then I was right in the middle of starting a new professional career. And that all happened at the same time. And I kind of decided after the divorce, you know what, I'm just going to start from scratch. I went to a city for a job. I didn't know anybody there. And I completely underestimated what it does to a person when you change central areas of your life at the same time. So the relationship was at an end. Then I left my kind of social setup. All the people, friends and family weren't near me anymore. I didn't know anybody in this new city. I had a new job, new colleagues. That was quite enough on its own. And then, as life sometimes happens, I had a really severe accident. So I was in the new city, in the new job, literally for 8 weeks. And I had a severe accident. I was brought to hospital. I was written off sick for 2 months. And all of a sudden, like, there were too many areas unstable in my life. And I have to say, I've never felt as kind of helpless and lost and out of my depth as I did at that time. So a lot happened all at the same time. And that's when I needed that mental resilience big time, and the experience that I made back then. And that's something that we'll be talking about today. It's not a matter of these things happen to you and you're like, oh, well, that's no problem, I'm fine. No, that's not resilience. Mental resilience means despite the difficulty and despite the challenge and beside the stress, beside the anxiety, you keep going one step at a time. And that's what resilience is about. It's not about not being affected. No, it's about finding tools and strategies to deal with the challenges at hand. And there's things we can do to train that.
Yeah, and I feel myself when I think about it, that it's easier after you, I say now, survived some critical situation yourself. Then I experienced the feeling that I've learned out of it. Is there something what you can remember that you learned out of this situation that you put yourself in, or that you came into?
Definitely. One thing I think which made a crucial difference at the time, it felt so overwhelming. It felt like there was this it's like this gigantic building site in my life, and I didn't know where to start, and that can feel overwhelming. So the lesson I guess I learned, only take one step at a time. If you've got a really long road ahead of you, do not look at the long road ahead of you. It's going to drive you crazy. Take one step at a time, one step, and then the next step. Always look, what is the next possible thing that I can do, and take one step at a time. That really helped me to cut it down into smaller pieces, to not look at the long road and all the things that I needed to sort out in order to stabilize again. So that was one aspect. Always just focus on the next possible step. The second one, and that was crucial, to be honest, is to look for support in challenging times. You know, it's always the things that happen to us. Think of it as like a weighing scale. Don't have a ruler now, it doesn't matter. Think of it as a weighing scale, right? So things happen to you, that's on the one side. And on the other side is your ability to cope with things. And if the load to carry gets too heavy, it is definitely recommendable that you get support. And there's support in many different ways. You can look for practical support, like after my accident, you know, I needed someone to clean my apartment, to do grocery shopping, right? So that's the practical thing. But far more important was the emotional support. So I got myself a psychological counselor who helped me on an emotional level, because it was simply, for me at the time, too much to bear. So that's the second learning. Look for support. You do not have to do it on your own. There's people, there's institutions, there's colleagues, there's companies. They are there to help you. And I guess one of the biggest learnings was, you know, we don't want to seem weak. So sometimes we don't ask for help because we don't want to appear weak. But when you start asking for help, I think you will be surprised at how much understanding and how much support you actually get. Yeah, I guess they were two important learnings. And one other important learning, and I think we'll probably talk about that a little more today, is always focus on what you can influence. Focus on what you can influence. So a lot of things are happening out there in the world at the moment. And yeah, they can be daunting. They can cause anxiety. They can be frightening. But we can't change. If we look at the kind of world politics, there's nothing that you and I can do, Thomas, right? But what we can do is how we deal with it, how we consume news and social media. We can decide how we're going to think about it, how we're going to talk about it, how we're going to let it affect us in our daily lives. And that's where we can take a little bit of control back. And that's really important. Always focus on things that you can directly influence and take your next step in that area of control.
Yeah, I always try to be really self-efficient, so I sometimes have a feeling I can do something, but then finally you find out, oh, sometimes you can't. That's tough. Mm-hmm. It was interesting to hear from your experience at that point. But is there, to come back to a broader spectrum, what would you say can we all do when we are ourselves in times of crisis? Because, yeah, well, in times of crisis, it's sometimes not that easy to reflect on the situation like you did now on something that was really far in the past.
Now, definitely what I mentioned about support, if you feel, I'm at a stage now where I feel kind of stuck. I feel kind of stuck because I have no good idea on how to get out of this. Then I would definitely recommend looking for support, whether you talk to your doctor or whether you talk to the employee assistance program or whether you look for a coach or whatever, or a therapist, but involve other people, because when we're in a moment or situation of crisis, we tend to be kind of in a tunnel mentally. We literally cannot see obvious solutions anymore. And that's why it's incredibly helpful to talk to other people and broaden the perspective. So that's one aspect. Also, one thing that is really important to be kind of more flexible in our approach. We know that people who are not totally rigid and the way they deal with things, they can deal better with adversity when they are used to not knowing what to expect. You know, some people are so conscious on making sure that they don't take any risks. So whatever they do, maybe they do highly perfectionistic work to make sure that nobody's gonna find any fault with the things they do. You know, people find strategies to make sure that things go the way they want them to go. And that's a certain rigidity in our thinking interaction that is not helpful when we're faced with adversity. So it helps to think more in possibilities. Okay, so here I am. I really don't know where to go from here, but what are the different options that I have? And that's definitely helpful to talk to somebody else about this, because sometimes we're so in the zone that we can't see those different possibilities. Yeah, so, and already I mentioned the circle of influence. That's also, I think, one of the key aspects that we can do whenever we feel helpless or anxious. You know, anxiety is basically, it's not an acceleration, that's the wrong word. Basically, anxiety is a very intense feeling of stress. So, you know, I feel stressed when you hold a presentation, you feel stressed, you feel a little bit nervous. And with some people, this regular stress can be aggravated. That's the word I was looking for. It can be aggravated into anxiety. And anxiety is something that can make us feel kind of numb and helpless, where we kind of freeze. We're not doing things anymore, but we kind of freeze because this anxiety feels so overwhelming. And that's why one core element is to always remain, always be in a position where you are able to continue finding solutions for the situation that you're in. Do something. Don't just remain stuck. Don't just remain caught up in your negative thinking that increases your anxiety, but get up and do something. Take the next little step that you can take. For example, you know, talk to someone. That could be a first step, and it could be a friend. It could be a trusted colleague. It could be an EAP counselor. But if you're in a situation where you feel stuck, just think about what could be one little step that's within my control, within my influence, that I can do. Because the worst we can do is when we feel anxious and out of our depth. The worst we can do is actually do nothing. Because when we do nothing, the anxiety doesn't go away on its own. It only goes away when we start changing things, when we start realizing that things are usually not as bad as we think they are. And that's also a really important aspect to remember. Thomas, I don't know how many times, this applies to everyone, I'm not just talking to you, Thomas, but how many times in our lives were we weighed down and burdened by negative thoughts about the future? You know, there's a change in the company. What does that mean for me? How is that going to affect me? Oh, my partner broke it off with me. That, you know, how will I cope? And, you know, in this situation, it's normal that we have maybe fears, so that we have concerns about how things are going to turn out. But when you look back realistically, I'm sure you will find that things usually do not turn out as bad as we initially thought they would. We're pretty bad at predicting the future. We're pretty bad at predicting the future, and why? There's a good reason for that, because when we hear bad and negative news, right? It's only one part of the equation. We disregard some other aspects which also play a role, because life doesn't just happen to us. You know, this is just one side. Life happens to us. This life events on the outside, but there's us dealing with it. And there's three things that we usually do not take into consideration, and that's why our predictions for the future are usually off. We forget that we're not helpless victims. We have abilities, we have capabilities, we have strength. You don't just sit there and let fate flood over you. No, you get up and you do something. So we forget that, hey, I'm able to change things, I have capabilities. So number one. Then we forget that we have people who support us. There's people, there's institutions out there, whether it's privately run, whether it's in a work context, whether it's from a government institution. Out there, there's people and institutions to help us. We are not dealing with things on our own. We don't have to deal with them on our own. And the third thing is that we don't take into consideration that I can't think of the English word now. Sorry, Okay, sorry, I just forgot the word for a second. The third thing we forget, life just doesn't throw challenges at our feet, but life also throws helpful coincidences at our feet. When did you maybe meet a person that changed something fundamental in your life? How many times did maybe a door open up that you never thought would open up? So life also has helpful coincidences that happen. So we simply don't know. When we project some negative event into the future, we need to take those three aspects into consideration. We are more capable than we are aware of. We have people to support us, and we never know which maybe lucky coincidental door is going to open up without us being able to predict it. And that's important to bear in mind.
That sounds interesting. And I have the feeling that, and I know it's really makes sense to also use, and I can invite our participants today, because mainly you will be participating today because your employer is providing an EAP from us. So you always have the possibility to reach out to find support and to talk to somebody who may help you find a different perspective on your situation, to discuss your situation and find ways to get active again, so you're not so to get self-efficient again. This said, I would like to have a look to Inken. Has there already been something in the chat?
Yes, first of all, Dorothea, thanks a lot for the encouraging words that we are not helpless and that there is help. There are people in the audience who is very thankful for this idea, because I think sometimes we forget this. We really do. So thank you for this. And there was a question regarding this, this feeling of being helpless, seeing the problems in the world, for example. And you said before, there are sometimes things we cannot change, we have no influence on. But if everybody thinks like this, if everybody thinks, oh, that's not my business, I can't do anything about it, things would never change. So this social obligation or this responsibility of society. So we will never change anything when everybody's thinking, oh, I can't do anything anyhow. So
good point. Yes.
Get back to my very personal life, and that's it.
Yeah. This is a really good question. Thank you for this. Absolutely correct. If we all just say, well, this is too big for me, this is none of my business, and things wouldn't change. Luckily, every one of us has like a particular maybe mission or vision for their lives. You know, for some people, it's protecting nature. So they will get involved in initiatives to protect nature. Other people will get involved in initiatives to protect animals. Other ones will go into politics and try and really make an influence, whether it's on a local level or a higher political level. So of course, it's important that every one of us uses their individual interests and strengths to make a contribution to society. That's important. Just I guess the point I'm trying to bring across is, the point I'm trying to bring across is, if I watch the news, right, and I just feel completely overwhelmed by news about war, instability, inflation, what good is it to me if I consume this information every day and there's nothing that I can personally change about this? I'm not going to help anybody if I allow myself to be weighed down by the bad news of the world. See, we need to bear in mind that just because we now have the technical abilities to consume news media 24/7, our brain is not made for this. And again, you know, Thomas, you talked about how individual it is, right? So some people can watch terrible news and they just register it and it doesn't affect them in an emotional way. But if you're somebody who maybe has a more sensitive soul, then watching bad news can highly impact your emotional well-being and cause you maybe anxiety and instability. So it's important to know, how much can I cope with? And when does it start affecting me in such a negative way that it starts to numb me and make me feel helpless? It's no good to anyone if we feel burdened down by anxiety and helpless. So everybody within their scope of influence, and that scope of influence is going to be very different, right? One person will go into politics, world politics, and the other one will just maybe go to the local initiative to help stray dogs. So it's important that everybody does their contribution to society, but the most important thing is that we remain able to act. If I'm weighed down by anxiety, I'm no good to anybody. I can't change anything now. That's what's important, to find that balance for yourself. How much can I handle? And when do I need to start protecting myself?
And I remember some words from you before. You were talking about positivity, staying positive. And I always remember something that I heard once. Wouldn't it be better if everything went down the hill, or your world turns upside down in the future? Wouldn't it be better if you still thought that everything would be great all the time until it happens? I really like that. But maybe regarding to our today's topic, what role do our thoughts play in challenging times?
They play, well, they generally play a very important role. And in challenging times, it's even more important to understand and be aware of the power that our thoughts have. We don't just think stuff, what we think affects us. And let's just do a little exercise. Everybody, if you want to do it wherever you are, feel free to do so, or you can maybe do it afterwards if you don't feel comfortable doing it now. But just think back to a situation the last couple of weeks where maybe somebody annoyed you, or maybe you were angry at somebody. Just think back to a situation maybe in work where you felt meh. So think back to that situation, maybe close your eyes and pay attention to your body. What's happening in your body as you think about this negative situation? You know, maybe you feel a tightness in your chest, maybe your shoulders are going up, maybe your face is crunching up. And now think about something positive. What nice thing happened the last couple of weeks? Maybe somebody smiled at you, maybe somebody told you they loved you. So same thing, remember the situation and pay attention to what's happening in your body. You'll probably stand up more straight, your chest feels more open. What we think has a direct physical impact. That's the mind-body connection. And that's why it's important to be aware of the thoughts that we think every day. And the problem is that most of them are on a subconscious level, right? Question to you, Thomas. Maybe you know the answer, I'm not sure. And the audience can have a guess for themselves. How many thoughts on average does a person think per day? How many thoughts?
About that. 20,000? No, that was decisions to make. 20,000 was decisions to make, I think. I'm not sure.
Yeah, okay. Well, obviously it's kind of challenging. How do you measure thoughts, right? It's not easy, but I don't know how they do it, but there's one recent study that came up with a figure of a minimum of 6,000 minimum. Other studies even more. We're talking about thousands of thoughts every day, right? And what we think affects the way we feel. So we are actually able to create kind of these, let's call them inner stories that I tell myself. So what stories do I tell myself every day? Is it a story of fear and despair? Oh, it's all terrible. This is all gonna go downhill. There is no solution for this. I'm helpless, I'm hopeless. Is that the kind of story I'm telling myself? Or I'm telling myself a story that is more hopeful in terms of, yeah, it's tough at the moment. I'm not pretending it's not tough. It is tough. But I know that with the help of others, but I know that with the help of others and with my own abilities, I am able to find a solution. I can't see it yet, but I will be able to find a solution. And that is the question: which stories am I telling myself every single day? Because that is going to affect me. If I have stories of negativity the whole day, it's going to affect whether I feel hopeless or whether I feel, yeah, come on, let's see where I can make a contribution to make my own life better, where I can make a contribution to make the lives of others better, to make a contribution to society. So it's really important to bear in mind which thoughts are running to my brain. The problem is that most of them happen on a subconscious level, right? So here is what you can do. When you find yourself being weighed down by negative feelings, right? Negative feelings are usually a signal. When you feel maybe anxious, when you feel sad, when you feel upset, when you feel angry, negative emotions, they're telling you something. They're sending you a signal. And when you have a negative emotion, then it's well worth taking a moment, maybe go to the bathroom, find a quiet spot and just take a moment and to do a little thought check. What thoughts are going through my head at the moment? And if you're in a work situation where you can't do it, then maybe just write it down and do a little reflection at home. But this can be very, very insightful. So which thoughts are running through my head? Are they thoughts of, this is terrible and I don't know how to deal with this, and I feel helpless, I feel small, I feel not good enough? If you have thoughts like that, there's a very simple question you can ask yourself. Is this thought I'm having, is it helpful or is it hurtful? Is this thought helpful or is it hurtful? Does it help me to deal with the situation at hand? Or is this thought making me feel even worse? Does this thought make me feel even more anxious? Does this thought make me feel even more helpless? And that's a little exercise. I know it's not that easy to do. But maybe you'll remember this whenever you're confronted with negative emotions. Take some time out on the spot or maybe afterwards and do a little detective work. What actually happened there? What thoughts were going through my head? And is that way of thinking helping me to deal with the situation? And if it's not, then we can think about doing a little reframing. So which thought would be helpful? Let's maybe take an example. A little example. If I catch myself thinking, I really don't know what to do here. I'm completely lost. I feel helpless and I don't know what to do. Help me find a solution. So if I reframe it and say, I can't see the solution yet, but I trust that with the help of maybe somebody else, a solution will come my way. It's a matter of time. It's a question of time. I will find a solution. I can't see it yet, but I will do my very best, and maybe with the help of other people, I will find a solution. That makes a difference. That makes a difference in how we feel, and that makes a difference in our ability to become active and take the next step.
I think that's really interesting, and I think that's always interesting for all the participants too. When we talk about exercises, techniques that might help me in everyday life just to cope with the things we talk about in those live talks. So maybe you have some more of exercises or tasks that we can do in everyday's life when we notice that our head is full and we are restless inside.
Yeah, there's definitely a couple of things we can do. So when we feel overwhelmed just by life, let's say, when we feel like it's getting too much, one thing that's highly recommendable is to create a safe space for yourself. Maybe in your home, maybe there's a particular comfy chair that you like sitting in, or maybe it's a particular corner somewhere in your apartment. Maybe it's out in nature, but find yourself a place where you feel safe, where you feel protected, and where you feel I can just be myself now. I don't have to be anybody. I don't have to do anything. That's the kind of safe space I'm talking about. And when it gets too much, then go to that safe space, even if it's only for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, but make a conscious effort to shut out the world, even if it's only for a short while, but to shut out the world just for this time to help you to stabilize again and to regain strength. So that's one thing you can do. Another thing, besides creating a safe space for yourself, is when you feel weighed down by negative thoughts, and a lot of people have that problem at night. They go to bed and then they either don't go to sleep because of negative thinking, or they wake up in the early morning hours and their head is going just crazy and ruminating and thinking negative thoughts. A good example is that helping me dealing with the situation, or is it making me feel worse? And I think very often we'll find that ruminating on negative thoughts does not help. It just makes me feel worse. So what can I do to stop that rumination process? It feels like your head is going crazy and the thoughts are jumping back and forth. And the good news is there is a little trick that you can use. Two little tricks, two things you can do in order to leave that endless line of negative thinking. And the tip is divert your attention. Very, very simple. Why does it work so well? Our attention, think of your attention like a torch, right? Or what would you call that thing, Thomas, in a theater? The light in a theater, Scheinwerfer?
Oh, spotlight.
Spotlight, thank you, I can think of it. Yes. Think of your attention being like a spotlight. I'm sure most of you have been in a theater at one stage in their lives. So in a theater, everything's black, right? So there's the stage and it's all black and you don't know what's on there, right? Only when the spotlight goes on, you can see what is on that stage, but only where the spotlight is. And our attention is like the spotlight. We can only focus our attention on one thing. So if the spotlight is on the left-hand side of the stage and there's something negative there, maybe some bad news, right? That makes me feel worse. You can shift your attention to something else, then shift the spotlight to the other corner of the stage and see what's there. Maybe there's something positive, maybe there's something helpful. So we can only put our attention to one thing at a time. We're not able to ruminate and recite a poem at the same time. It's not going to work. Our brain can't do it. So when you're trapped in negative thinking, consciously divert your attention to something that uses up concentration. And that can be anything you fancy as long as it occupies your concentration. Do something with your hands, maybe do a puzzle or origami, something you need to concentrate on. You can maybe sing a song or recite a poem or tidy the sock cupboard in your home. Anything that diverts your attention will help you to move that spotlight away from the negative thinking and move it on to something positive. So that works really, really well. So some of you might say, well, if I'm lying in bed, how can I do that? I'm lying in bed. If you're lying in bed for hours, ruminating and not sleeping, please do not stay in bed. Get up, go to another room, and then do something to divert your attention. That's one way of leaving that line of negative thought, because you're not sleeping anyway, right? You're not sleeping anyway. And the worst is to remain lying in bed and ruminating over negative thoughts is not going to help you. So get up, divert your attention to more positive things. And that's one final thing for people who have a problem with rumination. Finish your day with a positive thought. So maybe write down literally the last thing you do before you turn off the light. One suggestion is you have a diary by the side of your bed and you write down at least one positive thing that happened that day. Remember an incident that made you smile, that made you happy, and write that down and go to sleep or go to bed with that very last positive thought in your head.
Well, thank you. With a little look on the time, I would like to ask Inken if there are some more questions in the chat.
Yes, thank you, Thomas. There are indeed some questions, but I think at least 2 or 3 of them have been answered by Dorothea already, because people were asking about coping strategies when they are feeling down or feeling anxious, what they can do to get out of it or to deal with it. And you already gave us some valuable tricks, so thank you a lot for this. But one question is there, I think this also has to do with these negative feelings, and this was about perfectionism. Not that perfectionism isn't a bad feeling, but I think if you're a perfectionist, you tend to ruminate, you tend to think about what have I done, was it okay, couldn't I have done better? So this generates negative feelings as well. How do you have any tips? How can I deal with my perfectionism?
Yeah, that's I think a situation a lot of people are familiar with. And the reason for perfectionism is a strategy that we use in order to feel safe. Underneath, there's usually a fear of some sort, a fear of being rejected, a fear of being criticized, a fear of not being good enough. So in order to avoid, and this is where the negative feelings coming in order to avoid negative feelings, and usually this is something, based in our upbringing, very often it starts in our upbringing, in order to avoid negative feelings of being criticized, of not feeling good enough, we use strategies that help us to avoid that negative feeling. And perfectionism can sometimes be an attempt to create a sense of safety and security in order to make sure that nobody will find any fault with what I do. The problem with perfectionism is that if we have only a few tasks and plenty of time, well, go for it. But we all know what the reality is like. We've got too many things to do. And if we try and do them all perfectly, the result will be that we overburden ourselves, that we get very stressed. So it's something that falls back on us in a negative way because we spend too much time on tasks more than is necessary. So what little thing you can try? The next time you're preparing a presentation, okay? And the presentation's finished and you get this feeling of, I'll go over it again just one more time. Even though you've already gone over it 3 times, you have this urge to go over it again and maybe do a little tweak here and a little tweak there. When that moment comes up, to ask yourself, what am I afraid of? What am I afraid will happen if I only check this 3 times? Am I afraid that somebody might find a reason to criticize me? Am I afraid that I might be laughed at? So what is it that I'm afraid of? And then to ask yourself, how likely is that going to happen? How likely is it to happen that this worst case I'm imagining is actually going to happen? And the third question you can ask yourself, which price am I paying right now for this perfection? So the price is I'm putting in time that I don't have for my family. The price I'm paying is I'm already exhausted and I need a break, but I'm pushing myself even further. The price I'm paying is maybe that my partner is really annoyed because for the 5th time in a row, I'm working enormous overtime. So which price am I paying for this sense of security? And am I really willing to pay that price? So that can be a first step to break that optimism of always going that extra perfectionistic mile. Stop yourself and try and do a little detective work. And again, if that's something that you're seriously confronted with, it can be very useful to contact the EAP and talk to a coach and a counselor about this to find out what is the real reason behind your need to do things perfectly, if you feel it's something that burdens you in your daily work.
Yeah, and because I don't want to ask all the questions here, maybe there are some more questions. What do you say? Should I go on, or do you have some more questions from the audience?
Yes, I've got one more question. Dorothea, we talked about anxiety and anxious feelings a lot now, but there sure is a difference between more pathological anxiety and I don't know, a more normal fear of situations or of bad situations, or when you just, So I think this is very important to differentiate.
Yeah, that's a good point. It is very important. Think of it on a scale. Think of it on a scale where you have such severe anxiety at the end that it actually stops you from living your life or from functioning in life, because you feel so kind of numbed and burdened by this anxiety. That's kind of the upper scale. And on the other end of the scale would be, maybe just a simple nervousness. You have a presentation and obviously you hope it's going to work out well, so you feel nervous. That's perfectly normal and not pathological. So think of it as on a scale, and the further somebody progresses on the scale, there is a point when it can become pathological, and that's when it's really, really, really important to search for professional help. The EAP is the perfect place to start, and if you don't have access to an EAP, then please talk to your doctor. If you feel your anxiety is blocking you, it's literally blocking you, then it's very important to seek professional help.
Yeah, and I'm very interested in this topic because when we talk about anxiety and everything that we have on our minds, we talk about really big situations like wars here and there all over the world, and situations with new leaders of the government in different countries. And people, I really understand that people always want to be always want to know the newest news. And I know that I myself don't like it to hear, don't use that much social media, because I will always want to be up to date. Yeah, you don't want to miss out. It's like fear of missing out a little bit. But we talked before about it, and you also said that it's really important to be careful with information, social media, especially in times of crisis. Would you describe to us a little bit why this is so?
Well, it's kind of two aspects to this. First of all, I want to be clear on this and not misunderstood. Of course, it's important and helpful to be informed. It doesn't help anybody to just don't watch any news anymore. Some people choose to do that, and if they choose to, that's fine. But personally, yeah, I also like to stay informed. But again, the question is it digestible for me? The amount of news I consume, is it something that I can process and digest, or is it something, again, helpful or hurtful, or is it something that increases my anxiety? If I'm confronted, especially if I'm maybe more sensitive to bad news, then if I consume too much bad news, what happens in our brain is that the amygdala, that's basically a structure in our brain, which is like our inbuilt alarm system. If I feel threatened by anything in any way, the amygdala kicks in and our internal stress system kicks into gear. And that's actually a good and helpful thing. That's supposed to make us alert, you know, to be aware if there's danger around, so we're able to react. The problem is if I consume kind of bad and negative and disturbing news too much, this inner alarm system is basically kicked off all the time. So if I already have a problem with anxiety, I feel I'm easily affected, and then I watch negative news without any personal restriction, I'm not going to help. I'm not going to make matters better, but I'm going to make matters worse. So it's about finding a self-responsible way of how I want to consume news and social media. It's not about using it at all, but it's about being self-responsible in how I use it. You know, it makes a difference if I decide to watch the news from one source one time a day, or whether I decide to have like a push notification on my phone from 5 different news channels. That makes a difference, and that's what it's about. The events are there, the news are there, but I can decide how much of it I'm going to let through to me and into my brain. And that is the second point I was trying to make. Our brain has a limited processing capacity. I can only take in that much information. And we know from research that information overload has severe effects on our not only on our mental well-being, but it has effects on our productivity. It has a negative effects on our ability to find creative solutions. So when I'm in an already challenging situation where I need clever, creative solutions on how to get out of this, I need to give my brain a little bit of a break. Our brain needs times of no new information coming in order to come up with creative ideas of how I can do things differently. If I consume media and social media news without any restriction, I literally overburden my brain too much, and that's not going to help me to deal with my situation. That's why it's clever to have a good amount of self-responsibility and self-control. How much media and social media do I consume? And when I notice that it's not helpful anymore, it's making me feel worse, it's increasing my anxiety, to then literally be more restrictive about which sources I consume and how often I consume them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I have a feeling here, because at the beginning you already said that it is really important to face your fears sometimes, to face the situation, to find a way to get effective to face the situation. And when I have the feeling, when I look at all the news and media, it might seem like, okay, now I have to watch them to get affected, but in the end I cannot change anything by watching it. Yeah. And this is really interesting, because I always have the feeling, well, I'm involved in this moment, but I'm really not.
You're a spectator.
Yeah.
You're a spectator. And again, you know, for example, let's take Ukraine. If we didn't hear about it on the news, we wouldn't know it's going on, and then people wouldn't have helped and sent donations and all that. So sometimes news can also be the basis for me to get active, to make a contribution to others and to society. So as I said, it's very individualistic. How well do I personally cope with the amount of news and social media I'm consuming? If I'm fine with that, then I'll go ahead, you know. But if I notice it's making me feel helpless, it's making me feel small, it's making me feel out of control, then it's definitely a good idea to be a little bit more critical about how much of that I consume, and let it affect me.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We already mentioned it a few times today. If you have the possibility of the EAP, also because Inken mentioned before, here were some questions maybe that we think that we already answered, but sometimes we have the feeling we answered the questions, but you might have the feeling maybe we didn't go into the depth in your individual, from your individual point of view. So it's really a good idea to also use this possibility of the EAP to get individual counseling in your situation if you have open questions after this live talk. And of course, before I leave, have a final question for Dorothea today. I want to remind you or tell you that we have a short questionnaire after the session, and we really would like you to take your time, just 2 minutes, to answer to this questionnaire, so we can make our live talks more matching to your expectations, or even more matching your expectations in the future. But before we run out of time, I have a kind of a final question to you, Dorothea. What would be a first very simple step that I or everybody can start with from today on?
Okay, it's actually two things I'd like to mention. One, exercise can be very, very powerful. It does require a little bit of effort from your side, but I can assure you it's well worth it. Earlier, we talked about that things usually do not turn out as bad as we imagined them in our head, right? So if you want, after this or this evening, take a piece of paper and think back to all the challenges you've already faced in your life, whether it was a divorce or an illness or whatever. What situations have you been faced with? And how did you get through them? Because you're here today listening to us, so you got through them, right? What helped you? Which of your abilities and strength helped you? Which people or institutions helped you? And which lucky coincidences, which doors opened up without you anticipating them that helped you cope with the situation? And that can be very powerful to see that written down and to realize there will always be a solution somewhere along the way. A door will open up that I didn't see coming. A person will come and help me that I didn't see coming. So that's one thing. Take a look back and learn from the past, because you've already dealt with a lot in your life. You have. You should be proud of yourself. And you will be able to deal with more things to come because you've already proven that you can get through challenges. Number one. Number two, very simple. And maybe that's something you can find a time during the day where this fits to your life. Say after work, after you come home from work, or after you close the laptop and home office. Just find a quiet spot. Maybe go to this safe space that you have at home, just for 3, 4, 5 minutes. Take a few deep breaths, and just simply ask yourself, what do I need right now to look after myself well? What do I need right now to make myself feel better? What do I need right now to help me to cope better? Whether that's a call with a friend or just a cup of tea or a walk. But find those moments at least once a day where you check in with yourself. Hey, Thomas, Dorothea, what do you need right now to look after yourself well? Because it's our responsibility to look after ourselves. We can't wait for somebody else to make sure that we look after ourselves. That's our job.
Yeah. So at that point, within the given time, there's only to thank you, Dorothea, for all your answers, and thank you, Inken, for all the questions that you brought in from the chat. And wishing you all a good day. Thank you for joining.
Being here today. Hope you found it helpful.
And see you soon in another live talk, hopefully. Have a good time and all the best while trying to use everything that you heard today.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.